This is the Evolve Your Wedding Business podcast, episode number 2.
In a world where wedding professionals are struggling to market and grow their businesses, one podcast brings together top experts and actionable strategies to help you build the wedding business of your dreams. This is the Evolve Your Wedding Business podcast. Here is your host, Heidi Thompson.
Hello there, and welcome to episode number 2 of the Evolve Your Wedding Business podcast. Today, I've got a guest for you that I think you're really going to like, and I think you're going to get a lot out of this too. Because our guest today, Beth Hayden, literally wrote the book on Pinterest. She's an author, speaker, and social media expert, but we'll get into all of that in the interview. I just wanted to preface this a little bit and let you know that you are going to learn how to do Pinterest the right way and why it's so important for our industry. Here we go. Welcome to this episode of the Evolve Your Wedding Business podcast. Today I am joined by Beth Hayden, who is a nationally recognized author, speaker, and social media expert. And she wrote an in-depth book on Pinterest marketing, which is what we're going to be talking about today. Her book, Pinfluence, The Complete Guide to Marketing Your Business with Pinterest, has been featured in media outlets, including Fast Company and Entrepreneur Magazine. She also regularly contributes to the web's top social media blogs and is a senior staff writer for Copyblogger. So Beth knows her stuff. So thanks for taking the time to join us today, Beth.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Heidi. I appreciate it.
So I'm curious, what brought you to where you are now and what got you so interested in Pinterest to begin with?
Yeah, it's a weird story for me, actually. I started out as a blogging consultant, and I started my business here in Boulder, where I'm based now, and it is about 6 years ago. And I started teaching small businesses how to use blogs and content marketing for marketing their businesses and getting more clients. And Pinterest actually caught my eye, right around the time it was starting to really get big, which I guess I'm talking end of 2011, beginning of 2012, when everyone really started talking about it and paying attention. And it caught my attention because what I had been hearing was that it was great for getting traffic to websites and blogs. And I'm always looking for great ways for my clients to get traffic. And so I started paying attention to it, and I thought, I think there's something to this. And right around that time, I wrote a piece for Copyblogger all about Pinterest marketing. It was called 56 Ways to Market Your Business with Pinterest. And that's still one of the top articles out there on Pinterest marketing, mostly because the Copyblogger platform is so large. They have a really big audience. So it was sort of a right place, right time with the right topic. And that article was read by my publisher, Wiley and Sons in New York. And they actually came to me about a week after that post came out and said, "Would you like to write us a book on Pinterest marketing?"
Wow.
So, yeah, it was crazy. It was amazing. I feel like I was discovered. So what became a sort of, mild interest in Pinterest, if I can rhyme, quickly became, me just really delving into it and figuring out all the ways you could use it and picking it apart. And I had to write the book really quickly. I wrote it in 6 weeks because we were on this really compressed publication schedule. They wanted to push it to market right away, and it was just nuts. And so I just completely immersed myself in Pinterest for that time, and have been doing a ton of consulting on Pinterest for businesses ever since the book came out.
Geez, so it's, hey, you want to write a book? By the way, it's due in 6 weeks.
Exactly. The clock started
No
ticking.
pressure or anything.
Yeah, so the clock started ticking the day that she called me. So it took us, 10 days to work out the contract, and for me to quit a job that I had at the time. I was working in corporate America in a cubicle at the time, and I had to get out of there. So by the time I actually got home and started writing, it was 4.5 weeks.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it was nuts. But now what's great about that is that now you know that you can do that.
Well,
And
yeah.
well, look, you don't have to take 3 years to write a book, although my book is not War and Peace, I mean, it's not literature. It's a very simple, well, not super simple, but you know what I mean? It's a straightforward how-to tech book.
Right.
So, yeah. But anyway, that's my story.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
So, like you said, Pinterest can be and often is a very powerful traffic source.
Yeah.
So, why do you think it's important for the wedding industry?
I think it's important for the wedding industry because if your audience is brides, brides are on Pinterest.
Mm.
And I don't even know. I'm trying to think of another industry that I would recommend more strongly than wedding professionals to be on Pinterest. And other than maybe food bloggers and folks like, Whole Foods and, other folks who are trying to sell food, I don't know of one. Weddings, I mean, it's one of the major things that people are talking about on Pinterest. And if you're looking to connect with brides and that's your thing, then they're on Pinterest and that's where you should be.
Definitely. I think it's amazing how weddings really dominate that space. And
Absolutely.
there are so many people who really haven't, looked into Pinterest all that much because I'm sure it's sort of another social network,
Yeah.
one more thing.
Right.
So for
No.
someone in that position, who
Yeah.
hasn't really taken the dive into Pinterest, what would you
Yeah.
suggest they should do to kind of get started?
To get started. Well, the first thing I want to say, actually, you said something interesting there, that people are looking at it and saying, oh, I just don't have time for another social media platform right
Hmm.
now. And Pinterest isn't for everybody. It's not for all companies. I don't recommend that everybody gets on it. But what I do say is that it is absolutely worth testing because I find that lots and lots of marketers spread themselves way too thin. And they're on Google Plus and Twitter and Facebook and all these different places, but they might be doing them all, not badly, but doing them and not as deep as they should. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
So what we all, of course, have a limited amount of time to work with when we're talking about marketing and a limited amount of energy to get on these social media platforms. And I always want to get from my clients the most bang for their buck. And so what I tell them is if you're interested in Pinterest, try it out, see if you start getting traction with it, see if you start getting traffic, see if it moves the needle at all. And if it does, what I tell people is to possibly pull their attention over from a social media platform that might not be performing as well for them. If you're not getting as much traffic from Twitter or Google Plus, that's not where your audience is, you can use that time to get onto Pinterest. So that's just my little spiel, trying to convince people to try it out.
definitely. And I think even just the piece you said about paying attention to where your traffic's
Yeah,
coming from. So I think we
exactly.
assume that, okay, all of these things are sending us traffic, but
Exactly.
not all equally.
Yes, exactly. And some of them might not be sending you traffic at all. I mean, yeah. And I think there are a lot of marketers who don't necessarily look at their stats as often as they should. And I'm not saying you have to be in there obsessing over numbers every day, but it is a good idea to do a weekly or a monthly review at the least and just see what's going on and what the trends are so that you know how to use your marketing time and money. So, but to get back to your original question, you asked me how to get started.
Hmm.
And what I always like for people to do, and Heidi, you know your industry better than I do, so you tell me if this is workable for your professionals that you work with.
Okay.
But usually, I would think most people have a niche within their industry. And so I'm thinking with weddings, maybe you're going for, high end, luxury weddings or more of a budget crowd.
Yeah.
And I know maybe some people go across the whole spectrum, and then there might be other sort of sub niches in there. There's a whole industry here in Colorado of doing mountain weddings,
Oh,
which is a
wow.
whole different thing. Yeah, they're smaller and the venues are different, and you have to worry about things like altitude, and it's crazy. But I would imagine that your wedding professionals have a niche, even if it's just a local niche, like maybe you're in Asheville, North Carolina, or something like that.
Yeah.
But I always tell people to take a really good hard look at what their niche is and then picture that ideal client type, and you and I know this from the courses that we've been in, that it's the first thing you need to do is really picture who that person is and what they want, and then be thinking what kinds of content can I be pinning on Pinterest that's going to be appealing to that target client, that avatar.
So when you say that, and I get this question a lot, now what if it's content that, yeah, okay, relates, but isn't exactly, something that the vendor has created? How far
Yeah.
out can we go catering to that ideal client?
Yeah, I think you should go as far as you are comfortable going, and I've seen people who are pinning stuff that is not related at all to what their industry actually is, but they know that it's something that their audience needs. Let's say there's a toy company and their audience is parents, and maybe they're trying to reach girls from 5 to 10 or something like that, and some of the things that they're pinning are things like recipes or home decor or trying to think, ways to clean your house quickly, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
Because
like parenting advice, things like that.
exactly. Yeah. And because they know that the audience that they're trying to reach would like that information. So even though it's not directly related, they still put it on there. And what you're trying to do on Pinterest is establish yourself as an expert and a go to person for your target client. So for me, the more information you can put out there for that target audience that they're going to love, the better. But it's a matter of, what you're comfortable with and how much time you have and stuff like that. But I always encourage people to think, what is it that that target audience would want? And if they would like it, then pin it.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think, well, I have personally seen some companies, like you said, that deal with kids and they
Yeah.
pin things that pertain to having kids.
Yeah.
Auric vacuum cleaners actually
Yes.
has a really good Pinterest account.
They do.
Oh, and
Yeah.
they have stuff about like pet care
Yeah.
because, well, yeah, you're
Yes.
vacuuming up pet hair.
Exactly. Yeah, I loved that one. I actually featured Oric in my book because I stumbled across them fairly early on, and I thought, I think what these folks are doing is brilliant. There's a young woman who I interviewed, I can't remember her name, but she was being really smart, and you could tell she knew her target audience inside and out. But I loved that pet thing. I thought that was fantastic because all the pet owners are out there looking for ways to keep the pet hair under control. I thought that was brilliant.
Yeah, and on different materials, I'm sure people are searching for things like, okay, on this particular type of sofa, how can
Right.
I, prevent hair? And then you come onto that and oh, look, the product that solves everything.
Exactly. Yeah. And what you're doing is building trust because if Oric is giving me great information about pet care that's right there at my fingertips right when I need it, I'm thinking it absolutely is true that the next time you try to think about buying a vacuum cleaner, Oric might be right at the top of your mind because you just saw their amazing pin, last week that was directly related to what you're interested in. You've been following them on Pinterest. You comment on their pins. They engage with you on Pinterest too. I mean, it's really a fantastic way to stay top of mind.
I love that. Yeah, that's so funny that you liked that one too. I just remember
Yeah,
I was researching good Pinterest case studies a while back and I
yeah,
came across that and I just
yeah,
thought, oh my God, these people are absolutely
yeah.
brilliant.
Brilliant. Absolutely. Yeah.
So, what
Yeah.
goes into, a good Pinterest strategy?
Well, of course, like I said, it always starts with really trying to picture who your target audience is.
Hmm.
And then what I want to see folks do is do a variety of boards that are fairly specific. So you and I were just talking, before we actually started recording here about the fact that you've got a board for photographers on your Pinterest account.
Hmm.
So what I tell people is instead of just doing one giant board that's called weddings, maybe you have one that's all about dresses and one that features gorgeous wedding photography. You might have one that's all about travel because people are shopping for honeymoon destinations as
Oh,
well when they're
nice.
looking at getting married. And then, of course, your industry. I know you could probably list off 25 different boards. But what I want to see people do is get as specific as they can with the boards that are going to appeal to that target audience and really be a resource. And I want you pinning, what I recommend you pin is a variety of things, both things that are repinned from within the Pinterest world and then brand new stuff that you're pinning from other websites and blogs because 80% of the content that's being pinned on Pinterest is being repinned from somewhere else on Pinterest, so someone else's board. And so you and I, because we spend time on Pinterest, have probably seen the same, cute pet photos or the same Ryan Gosling shot again and again, and you keep seeing them. And so the content sometimes gets a little bit recycled. And so it is really good to bring in something that's brand new from outside that people probably haven't seen 5 times before, because that's often the stuff that can take off and get repinned, hundreds or thousands of times. So I want you doing a variety of stuff on really specific boards and then be as specific as you can in your descriptions. So I want keywords that people might be searching for there. If you run, let's say, a wedding venue in Asheville, North Carolina, I want the words Asheville and North Carolina in your descriptions. When it's appropriate, of course. If it's not something that's in Asheville, it doesn't make sense to do that. But you want to make sure that your pins are searchable on Pinterest. And the only way that Pinterest can search in those images is by looking what's in the description. So you just want to make them as specific as you can, and don't be afraid to use that description space to talk a little bit. I think that it's a vastly underused space because many pins there are out there where the description says nice photo or
Yeah.
ooh, gorgeous or something like that. You can put a couple paragraphs in there. They give you something like, I think it's 500 characters. No, 500 words. I wish I knew that off the top of my head. I should know that. But last I checked, you could get a couple of paragraphs in there.
Yeah, I've
So,
seen people really go to town with it.
exactly. Yeah.
But if it makes sense, if it's,
If it makes
describing
sense.
what you're talking about, or what the
Exactly.
image is, rather.
Right, if it makes sense to do that, yeah. Like, for example, if you are linking to a blog post, let's say for a budget-conscious bride, and there is a particular quote in there that you really love, or a couple of lines, you could absolutely cut and paste the quote over into the description box, and then and I find that you're more likely to get people to actually click on the link and follow it back to wherever you pinned it from, whether it's your site or somewhere else. So you can absolutely use that and be be smart about it when it makes sense to do that. It is often a compelling thing where when because it'll stand out, because hardly anybody is doing longer descriptions, and so people will look at that and say, "Oh, this looks different. Let's see what she wrote here." It does. It's a way to stand out.
So what about using things like links and hashtags within the description?
Yeah, always a good idea as well. Well, not always. I think hashtags can sometimes get a little overused, but it is a good idea to put a hashtag in there if it's appropriate. And then that'll help you get found in the Pinterest search engine and link to other kinds of content and stuff like that. And then with links in the descriptions, if you've got a strong call to action, where you're trying to get somebody, let's say on and this might not be right for your industry, but in my case, like a webinar or there's an event that I'm doing or something like that, it can
Hmm.
make sense for me to copy that URL and put it in the description field too. But sometimes you don't necessarily have to do it. It depends on what it is. But if it's something that you're really, really looking to do a little extra push so that you get a couple extra clicks over to your site, then that's a good idea to do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So what makes the difference between a okay, not so great image on Pinterest and a really good, pinnable, very clear what it is image?
Yeah, they've done studies on it that I think are totally fascinating. And apparently, we don't necessarily like people in our Pinterest images,
Hmm.
which I think is hilarious.
Yeah.
But we like a really close up, nicely lit, really, really well lit is important. And then a fairly close up image, and we need it to be crystal clear. Photos are sometimes a little bit more blurry, get a little blurred around the edges, that kind of stuff. The crisper the image is, the better. And then they say that, and I'm trying to think of what the colors are that do well. I want to say reds and oranges. And then there's some colors that don't do as well, and you can Google it and look it up if you're listening to this because I don't have this data in front of me. But there are colors that do well and colors that don't. But what I always tell people is to experiment too with your audience because your audience might not be the same as the general Pinterest population. And what I tell people is if you've got a list of pins and look at the ones that have taken off and see what's gotten tons and tons of repins, and in particular, what's giving you a lot of traffic back to your website. Take a look at that and see what your audience likes. But in general, close up images, really nice and crisp and clear, well lit, and for some reason, no faces. But no faces is tough when you're talking about the wedding industry, because you're looking at dresses and photography and that kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
that may not work for your industry.
So, what if it's the case that you're not a photographer, you don't have a ton of photos,
Hmm.
and you want to drive people to blog posts? Would
Yeah.
you suggest maybe creating a simple graphic with the title or something like that?
Yes, absolutely. I call them photo badges. I think I
Hmm.
might have made that up, but I talk about them in the book. And what you've seen them on Pinterest, where you've got a really nice image, might have some kind of pretty border, and in a really nice font that stands out on the photo, you've got the title of the blog post, or it's usually the title of the blog post, but sometimes it's something interesting about the post, that kind of thing. And then, so I want you putting the title of the post, and then also putting your website address somewhere down in the corner so it's still legible but it's kind of out of the way. And then what I recommend for people, and particularly in your industry, every time you write a blog post, I want one of those images embedded in it, and then I want you pinning it to your boards. And then of course make sure you've got pin it buttons on your website so that your readers can be pinning your stuff as well.
I was just going to ask you, how can you encourage people to
Yeah.
pin things because, of course, you want your stuff shared, but you don't want to be the only person sharing it.
Exactly. Yeah. So always have, pin it buttons, and there's so many social media, sharing tools and stuff like that out there. But, and you've also, if you're writing a blog, you want to have it in the footer of the post. So you've got about a million options for tools that'll give you buttons at the bottom of your post to share on Twitter and Facebook and Pinterest. But there's also a really good plugin out there. And Heidi, I'm going to try to find it for you and send it to you. So maybe you could put it in your show notes or something like that.
Yeah.
Because and I think this would be great for your industry in particular, the plugin, and it's a premium plugin, I want to say it's maybe 50, $60, but what it does is puts a pin it button so that every time you hover over any image on your site, the pin it button actually comes up in the corner of the image. And
Huh.
and I find people your pin rates from your site go way up when you use it, and I've seen that work really really well for my clients. And I think it's worth the premium plugin cost to do it.
Awesome. Yeah, let
Yeah,
me know if you can find that. I
yeah,
have seen ones like that, and I
yeah.
think they do work well because oftentimes when you get to the end of the post, it's
Yes,
you've kind of forgotten, what image you liked and but
exactly.
if it's right there on the image, it just makes it
Exactly.
easier.
Yeah, it's much more immediate, and it's pretty easy. And if I remember correctly, that plugin also lets you customize. You can put in like a default description for the image, so that if your reader clicks on it, it's going to autofill a description, and that can be really handy because then you can mention your business or your brand information, something like that, and also of course put a good description of what's in the photo. That's always first and foremost. You're doing it for people, not just for marketing all the time.
Right.
But it can be really helpful because otherwise it avoids your readers pinning one of your gorgeous images and then saying nice as a description, because most people will keep those default descriptions if they're good. They're going to keep them in there and just pin it with that default description. So I'm pretty sure it was the same plugin, but I'll try to look that up and get it to you.
Okay, awesome. So when it comes to actually creating a graphic like we were talking about, do you have any tools that you're particularly fond of?
I do. I love PicMonkey.
I do too.
Yeah, they're my favorite, and I haven't even upgraded to the pro version, and I use their free version for everything. Now, if you've got Photoshop and that's your thing, then great, use Photoshop if you're familiar with it. But that's often overkill for little photo badges like this. But yeah, I use stock images and upload them to PicMonkey, and then put text over them. And I'm not a graphic designer, but you can come up with something that's totally workable in 15 minutes. It doesn't have to take a ton of time.
Yeah, I was really impressed with how quickly you can do something
Yeah.
with tools like PicMonkey. Another one I came across, it's fairly new. It's called Canva.
Oh, that's not one I've heard of. Canva with an A?
Yeah, like Canvas, but without the
Yeah.
S. Yeah.
Oh, cool. I'll have to look that up.
Yeah, it's a little bit different than PicMonkey in that it's easier to create something from a blank slate.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so you could start with just, a background and then add on to that. You wouldn't have
Yeah.
to
Oh,
necessarily
that's
upload an
nice.
image.
Yeah, I know that's trickier in PicMonkey. I'll have to look that up. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll be sure to link to that too.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So, what are some common mistakes? I know we've covered a little bit, but what are the
Yeah.
mistakes that you're seeing people make with their Pinterest accounts?
I think there are a lot of people who feel like the only content that they can pin is their own.
Mm,
And so you'll see people with just, board after board of all stuff linking back to their own website. And I've seen people in the wedding industry do that, big wedding magazines and stuff like that. And they're still doing well because so many of their images are relevant and interesting and useful for their audience, but I think they're missing an opportunity to really be a resource. So I want you to picture yourself like a content curator, like a curator in a museum, where you're out there cherry picking the best stuff, and it doesn't all have to be yours. So, because I think people trust you more when you do that, and you're going to be looked to as a real go-to expert. So that's the first one. And the other thing is that I see people who don't pin their own content at all. So it's like one extreme or the other. Either they're pinning all their own stuff or they're not pinning any of their own stuff. And then what I always tell people is that with Pinterest, you can only do your success is based on how much content you've got on your website in many ways. Because if you've got a 4-page website that's just a home page, an about page, services, and a contact page, it is going to be tough for you to get traffic from Pinterest.
yeah.
You can be out there and building brand recognition and people will love you and all of that. But if you don't have any content to drive people back to, it's going to be tough for you to really have lots and lots of great success on Pinterest. So what I tell people is before you even start digging into Pinterest really heavily, you got to get some kind of content up on your site, whether that's YouTube videos or blog posts, which are often, easy for people to do. You're doing this podcast, which is fantastic content. You got to have something on your site, because if there's not a reason for people to come back to your site, they're not going to. They're going to stay in the beautiful, lovely world of Pinterest, where the houses are always clean and the kids never mess up. And, it's a beautiful place to be. Like, you got to have something great to like draw them away from that.
That's a really good point.
Yeah,
It is a beautiful place.
it
The
is.
place
That's
of the
why.
houses that you'll never have. And all these things.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's all this aspirational content, this stuff that we want to do someday. I mean, who
Hmm.
wouldn't want to spend time there all day?
Yeah.
So, yeah. So those are some mistakes. I'm trying to think if there are any others. I think not using photo badges is a mistake. And I know it feels like that it's going to take a lot of time, or, there's not going to be a big payoff from it. I've seen it make a huge difference. And I think people don't spend, some people, I know, and it goes again, it's like one extreme or the other. There are some people who say, well, I've been on Pinterest for 3 months now and I'm not getting any followers. And I say, how much are you pinning, or how much are you following other people? And they say, oh no, I haven't touched it in 2 months. And I
Mm.
say, well, that's your problem. You gotta actually spend time on the platform in order to be able to get followers. So be pinning on a regular basis. And I'm not talking all day. You can do 10 minutes a day, or just include it in the workflow. If you're pinning something for yourself, it may be of interest to your audience. If you're bookmarking something for yourself, I mean, like for me, all day long, I'm bookmarking social media articles and content stuff and all of that. And if I'm filing it away for me, it's pretty likely my audience is going to like it too. So I've gotten in the habit of, if I bookmark it, I stop and think, should I pin this too? Because it only takes another second, to pin it. It hardly takes any time at all. So be pinning on a regular basis, and then be following people on a regular basis too.
That's a good idea, actually, to
Yeah.
just kind of build that in. So I was going
Yeah.
to ask you, how important are the other things that we have on Pinterest, like following people, like the
Uh-huh.
frequency that you're posting, when you're posting, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I think it depends. I do think it's important to be following people on a regular basis, because it is one of the best ways. But lots of people will follow you back, and in some kind of activity on Pinterest kind of keeps your account alive, and lets Pinterest know that you're still there, and they can send some love your way. If your account has been abandoned for 2 months, it's going to be tough to get love from Pinterest.
Hmm.
So following people is definitely important. Pinning on a regular basis is important. And I like to see people, again, do a couple minutes a day. Try not to do it. Lots of people do this. In fact, I'm guilty of this too. They'll do one huge pinning block for like 2 hours on a Saturday night when hardly anybody is on Pinterest. It might be 11 o'clock at night or whatever, and so they're doing it all in one huge block, and sort of blowing the opportunity to get in front of a lot of people, because they're doing it late at night and not spacing it out during the week. And then as far as time, that depends on your audience. But I would trust a bet. I'm trying to think about your typical bride. Let's see. What some experts will say, and there are huge differences of opinion on this in my industry, but what some experts say is that it's really good to be pinning early in the morning, East Coast time, or after work, East Coast time. So maybe between, I want to say 5 and 9,
Okay.
something like that. And so those are some general guidelines. But what I always tell people is to test it for your audience, because you never know. You might have a crowd that they're total night owls, or they're all in California, or there might be huge differences for your audience. So you got to test it out and find out what works for your folks.
Okay. Are there any tools that you use for Pinterest? Because I'm a big fan of Buffer, but Buffer, of course, does not cover Pinterest.
All right, and I use Hootsuite for all the rest of my social media stuff,
Hmm.
and Pinterest isn't on there yet either. There aren't a ton of tools that I'm in love with yet, other than Curate. But Curate is for big brands. They're going to cost you, about, I think last I checked, it was about 1,000 a month. Um,
Ouch.
Yeah, but they let you do things like these incredible metrics, and let you break down your account in all kinds of different ways. And they also let you schedule pins, and it's an incredibly powerful tool. But it's only for larger brands. So if you're listening to this and you're a big brand and you want a killer Pinterest tool, Curate is the way to go. But for most small business owners, I like the iPad app and the iPhone app, and then I like looking at it on Pinterest.com and doing everything from there.
Yeah, they have a nice enough interface so
Yeah,
that you can actually function. Like, I can't function on the Twitter website.
right.
The Twitter
Right.
website makes my head want to explode. I
Exactly.
have to view Twitter through Hootsuite and post a buffer.
Right.
I can't deal with their interface.
Right.
But like obviously, the Pinterest is a beautiful place to be.
Yeah. Well, and also Pinterest hasn't released their API for developers
Oh.
yet. And so that I just heard about a week or so ago that they're starting to roll it out, which means like as soon as that's out there, you're going to get a flood of tools and scheduling and metrics and all kinds of cool stuff. But they've been slow in doing that. But when that comes out, we're going to have a lot more tools to work with that are great. And there are Pinterest tools out there. There are some that are out there. I just haven't found one that I've totally fallen in love with yet for that dashboard, Hootsuite or Buffer kind of experience.
Yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
wonder why they've held their API back for so long.
I don't know. I've
Seems
been
kind of
curious
odd.
about that too. Yeah. They're very cautious. I think they move kind of slowly. And I think it's because they recognize that they have a good thing and I don't think they want to mess it up.
That's true. That is
Yeah.
true.
Yeah. I don't know that for sure. That's total speculation on my part.
Yeah. I'll have to have a look and see if I can find any information on that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
And then,
oh, sorry, go
well,
ahead.
no, one other thing that's new, that's fairly new, is place pins. And so you can add a geographic location to a pin like you would when you're tagging a photo in Facebook.
I saw
Or
that.
I'm not a huge Instagram user, but I think you can do that on Instagram too, if I'm remembering correctly. And so that's new, and I think that's kind of cool. You could do things like I've seen people do cool things with weddings where they actually have their guest list and they're connected with people on Pinterest who are coming to the wedding, and then they'll have one board where they've got a pin for each guest, and
Oh,
then you can
wow.
actually look at them on a map and see, okay, we've got guests coming from all over the world, and be able to look at it on a map, which is cool. I don't think there's a huge marketing upside to that particular thing, but I'm sure there are ways you can use place pins for cool marketing things. But it's new. That's only in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, that might be something
Uh,
I'm sure as people play with that, different insights will come out of that,
yes,
how best to make use of it.
exactly. Yeah.
So, are there any things that you find with Pinterest that people tend to overlook or maybe just plain don't know about?
I don't think comments are being used as much as they could be. And I think most people just pin or like on Pinterest and they don't interact as much as they could. Because if I can use a quick example here, I know I'm just talking and talking and
No,
talking.
no, no.
I heard a story about a woman who she was in the wedding industry actually. And so she wanted to get in front of brides and she followed one of the major bridal magazines. I can't remember which one. And of course that magazine had, hundreds of thousands of followers. And then she commented on a couple of the pins that the magazine had pinned and wrote a substantial comment, something that was actually, compelling and interesting and made her look like a rock star, and somebody who really knew her stuff. And then what was great about it is that pin is then traveling all over Pinterest with that woman's comment on it. And so somebody reads the comment and then they say, huh, she's interesting. And then they click on her profile and she got an avalanche of followers from that.
Wow.
Yeah, and so there's strategic commenting on blogs and websites, but there's a way that you can do that and be strategic about it on Pinterest too. So what I tell people is follow the biggest names in your industry, and I'm talking folks that your target audience is following, bridal magazines or big wedding planners, or I'm not sure who it is for your folks, but follow the biggest folks you can find and then comment on their pins and you're going to see a big leap in your followers.
That is so smart because you don't even think about that. But yeah, of course, the comments
Yeah,
travel with the pin.
exactly. Yeah.
And if
And so
80% of pins are repins,
exactly. Yeah.
yeah, that's going to get some
Yeah.
serious mileage.
Yes. And it's not that hard to do. And I think pins that have comments stick out. They really do. We pay attention to it because we just You don't see it that often on Pinterest. I think it's way underutilized.
I think a lot of people aren't aware of the fact that you can pin videos as well.
That's absolutely true. Yeah. And I love the fact that when you're pinning from YouTube, you can actually pin it and then it'll play it right there in Pinterest. You don't even have to go back to the YouTube site. It's embedded right there in the pin.
I love that.
Yeah, that's very cool. So if you've got anything that would lend itself to a how-to video, a tutorial of any kind, something that's going to be really useful for your audience, then doing videos is a great idea. Hooking it in with your YouTube channel.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I saw
Oh,
somebody. I saw somebody do a. This might work for your folks actually. I saw someone do a. This is what it's like to work with me video. Sort of a welcome, or it was probably earlier on in the sales cycle where they were saying this is what you can expect from me, and it was some how to and what to expect of her processes and stuff like that. But then it was also interlaced with testimonials from her clients about how awesome she was, and I thought
oh,
that's a
wow.
great video. It's really smart.
That is very smart.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think videos, I mean, I don't have any stats to back this up, but my hunch is that videos would do very well on Pinterest because they stand out against just the image
Yeah,
when you're
because
searching.
how many times do you see them? I mean, you hardly see them at all.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and again, I don't have any scientific data to back that up, but I would agree. I would think that they would do fairly well. But the only thing you got to be careful of with videos on Pinterest is, the way on YouTube, sometimes it takes a screenshot that is not an attractive shot
Yes.
to show as the preview. There's a
Yes.
way to go in YouTube and edit that if it's your video, and so you want the absolute best cover photo that you can on that video because it's going to show up, and that matters on Pinterest. It absolutely does.
Yeah. So if you're on screen, you don't want it to look like you're just about to sneeze or something.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, we've all seen those really unattractive, shots of people where it's just, catching in the middle of a sentence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, how important is it for a business to have an actual business account? And I know business accounts, if you're listening and you aren't familiar with this, Pinterest rolled out business accounts not even that long ago. But
Right.
how important is it to make that transition?
I tell people, and I should make sure that I'm doing my research and making sure this is up to date. But what I tell people is that there's no huge difference between the two right now, between personal profiles and business accounts. What it does allow you to do is more easily use your business name as the name of your profile.
Hmm.
Because what it used to do, if you've got my company name was Blogging with Beth for a long time. And what it used to do was make me put the word blogging in the first name field and then with Beth in the
Uh,
last name field. And if you've got a one name company, it can be tricky because they make you put something in the last name field. At least they used to for a really long time. So then, with business accounts, they make it really easy. You can do whatever you want in the profile name, and it's all just one field. And then they do give you access to a couple of little tools and things like buttons for your website. But I think all of it is also available. If you've got a personal profile. What you're doing basically, if you sign up for a business account, is raising your hand for Pinterest and to Pinterest and saying, yes, I want to use this for marketing. My intention is I'm a business and I'm trying to use this to get clients and customers. And I think over the next couple of years, Pinterest is going to be rolling out some fantastic tools for businesses. But right now, there's not a huge difference. I don't think and you could definitely argue with me if you've seen otherwise. But in my opinion, there's not a huge compelling reason for people to switch their business accounts or their accounts over to business accounts right now, this very second.
yeah, I know there are some analytics, but they're very light at the moment.
Yeah,
You get some very basic stuff like
yeah,
how many repins your pins have
yeah,
gotten,
right.
and I think it's over like a couple of day period they show you at a time, something like
Yeah, and
that.
I think you can look at past stats. My trouble with the Pinterest analytics stuff is that I have never been able to really get it to work consistently for me.
Hmm.
And my clients say the same, is that they look in there and there's no data, even though we know we've hooked up their website correctly. And so I think that stuff is a little buggy, but I know that they're going to be improving that as time goes on because they know that their people need it. If they're not going to release their API, and allow developers to come up with tools where you can track this stuff and look at it in a dashboard kind of view, then they've got to come up with an internal tool that really works. So
Yeah, I have found the the internal analytics. I mean, they're okay. They're not
Yeah.
all that helpful. They don't tell you all that much.
Right.
Not a whole lot of actionable data. They're
Right.
kind of just like
Yeah.
sort of like the vanity metrics sort of thing, but nothing that you can say, oh, good, I'll pin more of this sort of thing.
Well, what I tell people actually, if for any reason the Pinterest analytics stuff isn't working for you, or it's not giving you the information that you need or enough information, you can look at almost the same stuff in Google Analytics.
Mm-hmm.
Not the number of repins and stuff like that, but one of the most important metrics for me to be tracking on Pinterest is which pins are sending me the most traffic. Where am I actually getting traffic from Pinterest? And you can dig into your Google Analytics and look in your referring sites and things like that and dig way down deep into that information. And that to me is actionable because if I know there's a particular type of content that is taken off like crazy with my Pinterest users, then I want to be doing more of that.
Yeah, that's the kind of stuff I expected to see when Pinterest announced that they were going to have analytics,
Me too.
but I was kind of
Yeah.
bummed. But
Yeah, it's not working as well as it could. And I always tell people set it up, try it out. It's free, you might as well do it. But if you're itching for more information, don't be afraid to dig around in Google Analytics too.
yeah, I think Google Analytics is great for that.
Yeah, me too.
And each pin actually has its own URL, right? So you could go
Exactly.
back. Yeah,
Yeah.
so you could
You
go
can,
back and.
yeah, and you can dig into that. There when you look on referring sites, and they keep changing Pinterest, Google Analytics around, but
Yeah, I know.
sites, and then there'll be Pinterest will be one of your main domains that sends you traffic, hopefully. But when you keep clicking on that and digging down deeper into it, it'll actually break down a list of the pins that have sent you traffic during the time period that you're looking at. So you could get a list of these 20 pins sent me this many visitors per pin, and you can look at it in really detailed ways. It's really cool.
That is really useful.
Yeah. I should do a Pinterest analytics and data, webinar at some point and show people how to look at that stuff.
Yeah, I think that's really useful because,
Yeah,
like you just said, not really getting that information from anywhere other than Google
right,
Analytics.
right,
And if people aren't sure how to dive that far deep,
right,
it can be a little
exactly.
tricky.
Yeah.
Well, if you do, let me know and I'll link up to
Okay, great. Thank you.
it. Well,
Yeah.
Beth, I've kept you for quite a while. I
All
will let
right.
you get running, but where can people find you online if they want to find out more information about you, what you do, your book, anything like that?
I appreciate the opportunity to chill a little bit here. Thank you. My website is at bethhayden.com, and it's just Hayden. And right across the top of my website is an obnoxiously large banner that gives an opt in form where you can sign up to get a free Pinterest marketing guide. And so it's a free ebook that gives you lots of great tips about getting involved with Pinterest or doing more with your Pinterest account if you've already got one. And then you can get hold of me at bethhayden.com. And I love to work with folks in the wedding industry. There is enormous potential for content marketing and for Pinterest. And so if you need help, I'd love to work with you.
And dig around on her Pinterest profile because you're going to find some good stuff.
Thank you. I have fun with Pinterest. It's really cool.
How can you not?
I know, it's just great. I mean, it's just such a treasure trove of information for me as a geek. I mean, I could spend all day in there. The pictures are beautiful, but I like the articles. I really do. I read it for the articles.
Yeah.
It's really, that's what I love about it is that, I mean, there is an endless amount of information in there.
You're absolutely right. You can find just
Mhm.
about anything. So, yeah,
Yeah,
have a play. Look in the search functionality. I think a lot of people forget that you can search Pinterest.
exactly. Yes, that's another thing. You talk about things that are underused. The search, absolutely. You can be looking for such specific information, and the search keeps getting better every day. When Pinterest first started, it was lousy, but they're getting a lot better.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you
Yeah,
so much. This has been really great. I've learned some things myself. So, thank you, Beth.
absolutely. Thanks for having me, Heidi. You've been delightful to talk to.
Ah, thanks.
Beth is pretty awesome, right? So I hope you got some actionable strategies that you can put into place today or this week. No matter which that is, no matter when it is that you have time within about the next week, go put something in place. It's great to learn, but what really matters is if you're implementing it. So the show notes for this episode can be found at evolveyourweddingbusiness.com/2, and that's the number 2. And if you've enjoyed this episode, please help me spread the word by going to evolveyourweddingbusiness.com/love. Now, what that link will do is create a tweet for you so that you can send it out to your friends and you don't even have to worry about what to tweet. Of course, you can always tweak it, but it's there for you to use. And please, would you take 2 minutes to just leave me an honest rating and review in iTunes? It's going to help the show and it affects how many people we can reach. So thank you so much ahead of time, and I really appreciate it. Now, if you have an idea for a guest or a topic that you'd like me to cover on the podcast, or even just a question you'd like to ask me, you can do that at SpeakPipe. That's SpeakPipe, PIPE.com/Heidi. And there you can record a voice message for me. So thank you so much for listening, and I'll talk to you in the next episode. If you're attracting visitors to your wedding business website, but you're not seeing any of them turn into customers, I've got something for you. I designed my Mind the Gap course to address just this. So head over to mindthegapcourse.com where you can get 3 free videos that will show you a little bit of what's in the course and give you some actionable strategies of how you can address this in your business.